Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. So I wanted to take the time today to talk about the Legion restrictions on the camera zoom, or on zoom out. So as many of you may or may not have known, Legion Beta is now stopping you from using a console script in order to zoom out further than intended. The interface has a small slider that you are able to slide and move your camera further back, but then you also type in a console script and you can move even further back. They have removed that option to move even further back, and they have declined to add that extra distance onto the slider in-game. So I wanted to not only read what they said and their perspective on it, and their logic and their reasoning behind it, but I also wanted to offer my own response to them to say why I think this is a relevant change that should be reverted, at least in some capacity. So let's get into it. This is one of the changes, according to Blizzard, in their blue post. This is one of the changes that we realize will be intensely unpopular with a group of players that has used console and WTF CVARs to increase camera zoom beyond what the UI slider permits. For everyone else, they probably won't see what the big deal is, since it's removing a hidden option that most never used. But for those who are accustomed to an increased max zoom, it's changing the way you're experiencing the game in a way that feels restrictive and simply worse. So why would we do this? Yes, Blizzard, many never use it. Well, it's not, in my opinion, I don't think it's quite relevant to say the general population of people who have never used this zoom feature, because most of them are probably not that worried about how zoomed in, how zoomed out that they are. They're, people who are playing with their friends because they just got went to see Warcraft and they got a month free of WoW subscription, or these are the tentative players that play off and on. These are not, the raiders, the common customer that keeps coming back to you. And so when they address that most have never used it, I would take a look at this poll. MMO Champion put up a poll: do you play zoomed out more than the default UI controls allow on live? An overwhelming 72% of the almost 87,000 players polled said yes, that they do. Now, this obviously is not a random and representative sample of the entire WoW population, of course, but this is telling to show who Blizzard's big customers are and who WoW's big fans are. Because if you are a diehard fan of WoW, it's reasonable to assume that if you are scrolling around on MMO Champ and you're reading about WoW news and looking at WoW updates of this new expansion, you're probably a diehard WoW fan, and you probably care a lot more about looking to third-party websites for extra information on how to improve as a player. So for Blizzard, these are the comeback buyers. These are the people that are subscribed for years and years at a time, or have never let their subscription lapse. Not the casual, not the side-by players who only sub for months at a time, take breaks, come back during big content batches. These are the people who are loyal. These are the most loyal of customers, if anything. Now, continuing it on. A little bit backwards. In a broad range of gaming genres, from RTS to action RPGs, being able to zoom out and see more of the world around you provides an objective advantage in the form of information. This is quite true. Due to that competitive advantage, camera unlocking or increased zoom distance are features commonly found in third-party hacks for a variety of games. Whatever the maximum allowed, that's what competitive players will use in order to maximize performance, even at the expense of the game's overall look and feel. So by this paragraph, they are acknowledging that this is a negative impact. Biggest thing is the word negative impact on rating, and maybe to a lesser extent with PvP. They recognize that, but they plan to do it anyway, which they have not provided a response on. The source of information is so valid, it's so important, but it's important only in certain areas of playing World of Warcraft. The most important of these is, of course, raiding, where the information is most vital. You are not going to be that hard-pressed to have all the information you need when you're in the leveling process. Leveling does not push you to its very limits to look at every little bit of information and see where every little mob is in 40-yard range as you're zoomed all the way out, It's not that necessary. But in raiding, it's life-saving in many ways, which Blizzard has already acknowledged, and that would feel restrictive or objectively worse if they reduce the zoom. We strongly believe that there needs to be parity, fairness, in this area between players who are using the default UI and those who have add-ons or knowledge of hidden console variables. Well, generally there's not much fairness with people who are using add-ons and, hidden console variables, because that's why they're better players, because they're looking at other ways to maximize the game. If you're trying to bring parity between players using add-ons and players who are not using add-ons, well, you might as well ban all add-ons, because add-ons give an innate advantage by their definition. They add on to the gameplay. They add on to your options. They add on to ways that you maximize your performance. If we're going to be fair in all aspects, we should be fair in all aspects. Remove add-ons. I'm sure that'll go over very, very well. One option was certainly to just allow the in-game slider to go all the way up to the CVAR hard cap. Very reasonable. I like this idea. Where are we going with this? But that scale is beyond the one around which the game was designed at its core. Meaning, when you have your game designers, they're sitting at the maximum allowed by user interface, by default user interface, to design the game, to design the textures, to design what everything looks like. Sure, and I understand that. You are designing at a certain level for us, and then we are taking it to a further back level. To which I respond, how long has this been in the game, and how long have people been using it? You would think that, why now is this a problem? Well, the development team builds the world, its art, its combat mechanics, and other interactions around the base UI experience and scale. At the 3.4 CVAR zoom level, your heroic Warcraft avatar takes about as much screen space as one of the dozen of Marines you might control in a game of StarCraft. That's quite true, obviously. One of the biggest things to look at, though, is when is it looking like a one in the group of Marines? When is this happening? When do you feel lost in this crowd? Well, generally it's probably going to be in raiding. If anything, leveling is, if you're leveling solo, which many people do, you have that experience of just your character, and you can zoom in, zoom out as you would prefer. You don't feel like you are worried about getting lost in a crowd, because if you don't want to level in a crowd, you just go to another part of the leveling zone if you can, right? But if you're in a raid environment and you want to be able to experience the full richness, the class fantasy, which has been emphasized strongly throughout this beta process, well, you can just zoom in. Or if you're in a raid instance, you're probably going to feel lost in a crowd anyway, because there's a number of encounters where, well, all the melee are stacked in melee, and many ranged are running in groups together or are, staying in more stacked formations. So, sure, the art team has made these combat mechanics, they've made casting animations, they've made all this nice art and things like that, but you would identify these things, and these things stand out to you so much more while you're leveling, or you are just in general out in the world. Much more so than if you're in a raid instance. For instance, I love a lot of the DK attack animations, but unfortunately, I'm probably not going to see many of them when I'm in a raid instance, even if I am zoomed in, because I will be focusing on not staying in fire, and I will be packed in melee with 5 to 7 other people who are also having their flashy attack animations going off at the same time. If I can pick out one or two, sure, that'd be great, just to see what I'm doing, but these things are so much more emphasized when you're alone in the world or you're with a small group of people in the world. In raiding, you seem to be lost in the crowd almost no matter what you do. And that's one of the big aspects of teamwork. If anything, when you are seeing your entire team working together to down the big green orc this expansion's rolled out, it has a certain appeal to it. And I for one, really enjoy it, because you are seeing, as a healer, who do I have to life grip to save their lives? Who is dodging mechanics properly, and who doesn't need, extra healing, or I know this guy will take extra damage because I see him moving towards the fire and he has to run through the fire to get back to the team. Things like that. And things like that matter. If we have an objective advantage in information, it is not fair to say, as Blizzard later does, I'm not sure if it's fair to say that this level of zoom entails your character dominating the screen or removes any awareness of nearby threats. Well, it's not just threats, it's also doing your role to the highest level, which is every healer's goal, I would hope. Now lastly, basically all of us started out playing WoW at the UI-enabled zoom level, and fell in love with that world enough that we now find ourselves here posting on an expansion beta forum discussing its future. Now, not entirely true. We are here discussing the future of the beta because we love the game, and it's not just because we love the world. I personally very much enjoy the world, but that's not why I'm subscribed to World of Warcraft. As a customer, I am subscribed to World of Warcraft because of the 20-man experience, because of the raiding experience that it brings me. I very much enjoy having a heavily coordinated, heavily involved team that is often very tight-knit and has a lot of friends who I've been lucky enough to meet in real life, where we are working together to accomplish a task. And that is why I'm subscribed. And maybe other people have different reasons. I'd love to see them in the comments. But it is not fair to say that it is just because we like the world, just because we liked getting lost in caves the first time we were leveling, just because we liked it when our friend dropped us off in the Barrens and we just had no idea where to go, you know. I love those things when I was first leveling, but that's not why I'm still subscribed 5-6 years later. At some point, back to the quote, we saw a raid video and wondered how they could see so much of the field at once, which I did, or we saw a forum post or got a helpful tip from another player and learned that if you typed /console camera distance max factor 4, you could zoom out way more. And we never looked back. But was that original experience bad, or have we just grown accustomed to something different? Now, to which I would respond, why did we never look back? They're right in saying that we never look back, and I know many people who've typed it in one time, and they've never ever had to change it again. So when they go into beta, they're just like, I don't remember how to do this. I remember I did it, but I don't remember how to do this. The reason that someone sticks to something they experience is because they enjoy it. And when they are still presented with the option of going back, they're freely having the option to go back. They chose not to. And that is significant as to why. You can discount the players, the amount of players that use this zoom out feature as being a small minority, as being not as significant to the entire player base, and this change is not going to change how we feel. But it is important to know the type of minority that we are. We are the vocal players, I hope. We are the respectful players, I very much hope. You know, we are the dedicated community that loves this game and very much enjoys it. And my biggest focus is the raid environment. If I am, you know, top 100 World Holy Priest rating, if I am in Friendship Moose runs helping others who have not killed Heroic Archimon kill it for the first time, this information matters to me. And this viewpoint matters to me. Experiencing, seeing what everybody is doing when I'm tanking, for instance, and being able to have that full field of view along with my other add-ons is important to me. And I believe that if there was a solution that could be made, my suggestion would be allowing further zoom out in raid instances only. I personally have no problem, and I think it's not very impactful at all when you're in 5-mans, when you are in the world questing, to be more zoomed in. And in fact, you can see a lot of the nice art assets that are in the game. What I do not like is looking at why we are raiding. Well, we are raiding to kill the boss. We are not raiding to enjoy the art assets. And in fact, many art assets, not that it's a bad thing, it's just a thing, are used from when you're in the world, you know? For instance, Suramar Palace is in the world, and then you go into Suramar Palace, and it looks the same in there as it does outside the world when you're questing there, you know? So to me, I don't think that we lose out on any kind of class fantasy, and I think this change for the idea of having a more full, more rich experience, even though this was not explicitly stated, but it feels heavily insinuated, I feel that that is not a relevant need to push into a raid environment, because that is not the point of raiding. In questing, sure, I think that is an absolutely, you know, wonderful aspect to add to raiding, to say, hey, if you would like to experience more and more of what the world looks like, and who you're fighting with, the teammates that you're fighting with, the heroes that you're fighting with to save Azeroth, I love that idea. But, again, when you're moving into pushing this and punishing us, and knowingly punishing us by removing options in a raid instance, I believe that is not correct. I believe that is not logical towards promoting and improving the raid environment come Legion. As many of you probably know, who are raiders yourselves, many guilds have died in Warlords of Draenor. And while this always happens, and Blizzard can talk about how it always happens, I believe the PUG experience, the pickup group experience, the group finder experience, and the organized raiding experience has declined drastically for the North American region, and I mean, I'm sure the Europeans can attest to that as well, where the quality of the raiders is lacking, the organization of guilds and the ability for guilds to churn out good recruits is declining, and the biggest demographic, if you will, that is going to be hurt by this is going to be lower skilled or more casual raiders. These are the people that are going to be more impacted by this, because while in time hardcore raiders will adapt begrudgingly, we will adapt. But when we are trying to get better and better recruits, well, we always have little Johnny who is always standing in fire when we zoomed out all the way. So just imagine him standing in every single one shot now that he's zoomed in all the way out here, all the way in here. I mix those up a little bit, but it's okay. You know, to me, if you are taking anything away from these players, from a player base that has gotten more and more skeptical of the design element, of the communication element, I believe that this is a unnecessary change. It is a change that removes options, which for us we never would like to have. We would always like to have more options. That's one of the biggest reasons why, for instance, I really like Legion. Sorry. Is because we have so many options to get artifact power. I love that. You know, you are not telling us how to play. You are saying, here is everything you have, go out and play. But now when we are placing extra restrictions on that, I believe it's unnecessary, illogical, and needless. We appreciate the art assets, we appreciate the development of World of Warcraft, we appreciate the developers of World of Warcraft. But this is a change that is unnecessary in a raid environment, and I would be more than willing to have a compromise towards the raid environment, because that is my personal biggest issue. I would be happy to be more zoomed in. I would, you know, be indifferent to being more zoomed in. It would be okay for me because of the fact that there is no competitive advantage or disadvantage for when you are questing. That is, there's no competitive questing anymore, right? Thank you all for watching. Let me know what your thoughts are. Hopefully the devs see this. I'd be interested in the devs' response or having a conversation about this. I would love it. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you all next time.